Hello, Clarity Crew. Welcome back to our little corner of the podcast world. Today's podcast is one that is themed for Women's History Month. We'll be helping women in the topic of therapy. Our featured guest today is Brittany Spencer. In today's podcast, I want women to take from this a way to navigate their mental well-being and emotions through an outlet such as therapy, as something that I had to learn throughout the years and get comfortable with and unlearn the negative stigma that may come with therapy. I felt like this would be a great start to our Women's History Month just to help aid in that process and to get a perspective from a therapist's point of view. She's compassionate. She has an unbiased viewpoint. I'm very excited for you all to meet Brittany in this podcast and for you to take some gems from her and hopefully apply them to your life. If you need a better understanding, if you need some more clarity, and if therapy is a way for you to go, it's on this podcast for you. So I hope you enjoy. And let's welcome to our little corner of clarity, Brittany Spencer. Today we have my former basketball teammate and one of my best friends, Brittany Spencer, who is an LCPC, which is a licensed clinical professional counselor. Brittany is based in Baltimore and Florida, and she tackles the unique challenges that women face when it comes to stress, their jobs, anxiety, depression, grief, and she even does counseling for couples and their unique and dynamic differences in different couples therapies. Everything that Brittany does is impactful, powerful, and inspirational for myself, being her friend who gets to see the behind the scenes of the therapist and her in action. Today, she's going to offer support in diverse ways. Honestly, she's the woman of color. She's a woman. She's part of the LGBTQIA plus community. She has so many different viewpoints that are helpful for just about any woman out there that may need a little bit of guidance. So please join us for this meaningful conversation in therapy for women and self-discovery and creating a life that kind of aligns with you and what you want to see for yourself. Hello, Brittany.
Well, hello there.
We have a few questions, but I first want you to just kind of give like a quick background in how long you've been in the field, pretty much your professional accolades, if you will, that make you a LCPC.
Well, as you said, I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. I'm based in Baltimore. I am also licensed to do telehealth only in the state of Florida. I'm currently part of a group practice here in Baltimore called Space Between Counseling Services. I've currently been at this practice for about, I guess we're probably like the 9-year mark that I've been here. Fortunate enough to kind of been being able to kind of do everything in one place. So that's also been amazing, and being able to build community and network while here. I am also a sex therapist. Fingers crossed we get that paperwork in and it will be certified. But I am also a sex therapist as well.
Awesome. So you've been in school too long, and I tell you that all the time, every time we talk. I have known you since 2008, 9, and I need you to be done with school soon. You still in school?
We'll
It was
see.
cool, stressing me out. No, I'm just kidding. I met Brittany at Waynesburg University. We played on a basketball team together, and honestly, to see her grow into the woman that she is now is rewarding. First of all, that I get to witness it, but it is also like it's reflective as much, like, to see where you started. And it's not one of the questions that I have listed, but you did not start in therapy when we first met in college. You were in something completely different.
Yeah, a little nursing major there. We made it to clinical though. I told you, I'm like a semester nurse. They gonna stop.
That was it. That was it. Now we've shifted.
Yeah.
We shifted to exactly where you need to be because you fit in perfectly here. We're going to jump into the first question I have for you. And did you believe in therapy before getting involved in the field?
I feel like it was one of those half and half type of things. Definitely aware of like what a therapist was and kind of like the understanding, but I think like once being in the field, really truly being able to understand it was definitely beneficial. Kind of thinking of even in terms of like growing up before, it was like, don't you go in there telling people your business. You've been at CPS here, and I'm like, what is happening that CPS has to now being at a place where, again, hindsight's always 2020. So being able to now recognize like the benefits in terms of like having a place that is like specifically for you. We live in fast-paced environment in general. So really just like having like a container where you get to like choose yourself and show up for yourself has definitely been important. So I definitely would say I probably see it certainly more so now versus like messages that maybe I got from like family and other people before.
Absolutely. And as a person who had to deal with CPS themselves, correct. Don't you go into telling people our business. What? They asked me a question. They need to mind their business. Okay. It's a stigma that I think we have in our community. I think, yes, in the Black community, but I think in any poverty type of community, anyone that is in that lower tax bracket,
Mm-hmm.
it goes and it's just like, why? Is that another form of vulnerability that we're trying to hide? I don't know. Here we are, unlearning.
Yeah.
Unlearning in our 30s. What in the world? Now, I know you didn't do this, of course, when you were younger because you just gave us that answer, but did you ever have a therapist when you got into your adulthood, or do you have one right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in terms of childhood, not necessarily. I
Mhm.
have like a very close knit family, so like often the idea was like the family can fix it. If it's an issue, you can
Mhm.
go to somebody in the family, and not being able to recognize like the benefits of being able to have someone who is sort of like removed from like the source,
There you
so
go.
to speak. So I think a lot of it is just kind of from like that kind of like cultural aspect, like whatever you need, the family can provide, and that's sort of like what was ingrained. So I definitely didn't have one growing up. I think the first time like a therapist in terms of like childhood really became
Mhm.
aware I was with my brother. We had like a death in the family, and it really was like impacted. He needs
Mhm.
therapy point. And even then, it was like he didn't feel comfortable to talk. So I think a lot of it kind of goes back to like, the messages in which you're exposed to early on. In terms of adulthood, absolutely. It is too much happening out here not to have somebody that you can talk to for you. I have, rather it's individual. I mean, I've seen a couples therapy. I mean, you really need people. One of like the important things to recognize, like you have your source and you have people that are there, but again,
Mhm.
being able to have a space where you're not kind of like in care of other people or having to show up in some of those spaces. Like I really like hone in on like having something that is like for you, because again,
Mm.
we just fast paced time. There are so many societal changes, administrative changes. There's just so many things taking place that it is important to have like a space where you can just process like what's happening today that was different than yesterday.
I didn't think about it like that. That
Yeah.
that last one, process what's happening today, is different. That's a good one. And I myself have never been to therapy, and you know this on a personal level. I've never been to it. For a long time, I didn't think I needed it. I didn't realize that there was anything that was actually hindering me until my husband, who has had to do, he works in youth development, so he has to do training in their emotional mental states and how they reach out to children and make sure they provide them the safe place to come after school and all that. And whenever I would say something in the past, I would just be like, that's how my family worked. And he would look at me crazy. I'm like, just because you have a peaceful family, like my family, I know they still love me. They're like, only we can act like that with each other. Like, and then one time, he had a trauma level. So they were trying to see the trauma levels that the kids have gone through so they can meet
Mm-hmm.
them where they're at. And he was like, well, it was like maybe 3 years ago. And he's like, I'm going to ask you these questions. I was like, oh, okay, that's weird, but okay. So I'm already in my 30s. Well,
Mm-hmm.
seasoned into the 30s here. And I said, okay. And I'm answering them. And he was like, you are at a level 5. It was 1 through 5. I said, what does that mean? He's like, you have trauma. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no trauma. I don't care nothing about them people. He says, you do. You think that that's normal. I said, it is. I've learned how to handle the situations throughout the years. But at the same time, I'm in my 30s and it still pops out. Once he did that test with me, I became more aware. So I'm literally more aware of triggers and coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms and stuff like that because he just asked me the questions. Before that, I
Yeah.
was like, and then I was like, maybe therapy would not hurt. Because before then, I was like, I don't got time to do all that. I don't got
Yeah.
time. And then I was like, okay, well, on your scale, I'm a 5. That does not sit right with me. I don't know why. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care, but I do. It was weird. So I know what you mean to have your own little space because I didn't think I needed therapy. I was just like, once you actually compare what's an average life and what's people are going to get exposed to things, but you getting exposed to a little too much. Yeah, it's a little too much, and you need to get that checked out because it shows up when how you respond to your kids. Now I'm just like I see it now because if you would have said this to me 3 years ago, I'd have been like, "Nah, I'm tough, I'm fine, I can still." But no, you're not. No, you're not. You just found a way to cope. Yeah.
Yeah. that's a big part of it too. Like when we're thinking of trauma, we often think of like, what is this like one particular thing that happens that's out and like, yes, now I can say like yes or no to trauma. But I think we also don't recognize like the various ways that like trauma can show up. Rather, it's like in terms, with family, in terms of just like systems that are in place that are oppressive and do not show up in best service of like, Black people, women, queer community. Like there's so many ways that like trauma can show up. So I think that a lot of it is also like recognizing how some of those stigmas really stand out in
Mhm.
terms of like, hey, I have to have this one act that has taken place, and like now I can say yes or no to trauma. And sometimes trauma is like secondhand. Like sometimes we're dealing with trauma from like our caregivers. I always recognize like my parents were very much like, you're not staying over anywhere in this house except for family, because that were things that they've witnessed maybe in their upbringing or stories that have been passed down to them. So, trauma isn't always something that is immediately showing up for like us ourselves. Like we're also dealing with like the family aspect as well.
Yes, and me definitely being the oldest girl in my family, I deal with everybody's. They all tell me, I'm like, y'all are adults.
Hmm.
At this point, I'm 20. I'm trying to figure out where I'm at in this world, and y'all
Yeah.
telling me y'all's mess. But
Yeah.
yeah, being the oldest girl, that does, because they don't put that on the men in my family.
Hmm.
Men don't even make their own plates.
Okay.
I don't know where they at. Your legs work, but I'm the oldest granddaughter. So I get all my aunt, and I only have aunts, so I get all my aunts and all my mom. And I'm one of 5 girls, so I get my sisters, and I have my cousins that are girls. And it's like, you know what? I quit. I said, yeah, I got a lot of people's trauma that I had to learn. I learned from theirs. I didn't go through it. I rewired myself to learn not to do what they did. But like you're saying, some people you just get dumped on from your family, generational trauma, and you're like, what the heck, So I definitely understand that. It's a lot, and I didn't realize that until, like I said, I was talking about it, and I was like, dang, I really do know everybody's business. And it took a toll on me whenever I was going through postpartum with
Mm.
my oldest child, and I'm like, everybody, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
That was my early 20s. I was 23 when I had my first one, so that was where it dawned on me, like, I am really the only person that gets everybody's trauma and my grandma's trauma. I'm getting everybody's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that, and probably should have considered therapy at that point. I'm learning a lot. I have. I've been stubborn for many a years, but I got into my 30s. I said, yeah, you could have helped yourself a long, long time ago. You could have.
Well, there's no right or wrong time, right? Like sometimes like we go through, sometimes it's like lived experience that gets us there. And I think that shows up even in therapy as well. Like sometimes someone can look through a directory and they may be like, you know what, I'm gonna go. And then they had a consult, trying to go deep, deep. Nah, we're not going. Right. But maybe that's where they are at that point, at that point in time. Maybe they are just at the age where they're open to consults. And again, sometimes we as therapists, like we show up as like stepping stones as well. This is just where this person was, sort of like ready to show up, and this is where we're able to help them. And they're able to take that and move on to, perhaps another therapist that's able to take them through like another phase or another kind of like step within that. So there's no
Absolutely.
like right or wrong time. Like sometimes it's just, we find ourselves there, and some of it is also like the education around it
Mm.
as well. Being able to recognize like, was I aware that I can have a consult with a therapist, or am I thinking I'm being charged right away? So I think that some of it is just the educational pieces.
Okay, so that then flows into the next question, which is, what's your approach to therapy, and what actually drew you to the field?
Yeah. So initially, I got in the field. I mean, as you said, I was a nursing major at first. So in my
Mhm.
mind, because again, family aspect, you want to help people, you go into nursing. Like medical
Mhm.
field is the way to go if you want to help people. Like, just like in my family in general, like you want to make sure job stability, all those things. It
Yeah.
was like medical. So I think that was kind of like the first part, like breaking away from just that in general to recognize like there are other ways that we can just show up and be of help to people. I also had an uncle who had
Mhm.
mental health struggles. And just as a family, like again, like the idea is like the family will help. The family will help. And sometimes there were moments like recognizing like we have tried it all. Like we are tapped. So I think that really just being able to kind of like have that level of awareness,
Mhm.
rather it was like recognizing different episodes that he would have, but it would, be seen as like, oh, this is him being crazy or him being whatever. Whereas like, no, actually there was a lot of like, undiagnosed and misdiagnosed. There were so many things that just kind of went into it, and really kind of like just learning from him. Like he was an uncle that I was also close with. Even like my family would joke like, yeah, that would be the one that you close with, right? But even still, just being able to see like again how just some of those struggles just weren't really understood, and sometimes it was he wasn't mentally in a place to be able to express what like his needs and support were. Was. And then some of it was also just being able to recognize, like, if you send him to an office with, white clinicians, white providers, he's more likely to self-protect himself. So really wanting to be support for people who like looked like me was definitely something that drew me even further into it once deciding like, yes, therapy is where I'm wanting to kind of navigate and where I see myself kind of moving forward.
Nice. Even though we've been at this for over a decade, I learned me a little something else now. That's crazy. Okay. So let's go ahead to the next one here. Can you share your perspective on the common misconceptions people have about seeking therapy, particularly the idea that it signifies that something is wrong with them?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. I always kind of like, and joke with my clients and all. It's like it's not so much that something's wrong that you came here. It's like what's wrong when people don't realize why you're here. I think the biggest conception is that one, that there's something wrong and that you're going here to get fixed. Like you're not going to leave as like, okay, that traumatic event is now gone, or maybe my anxiety is of no more. Like the idea isn't that you're going to be fixed, so to speak. But some of it is like being able to have different perspectives, to be able to kind of just like navigate certain environments. Some of it is, hey, maybe I'm going into therapy to get more of awareness of, how I maybe repeated patterns that come about in relationships. So, I always say you're not coming to fix, because that kind of like perpetuates this idea of like brokenness to start. Nothing that's broken about you. You're coming to therapy in general. That's like a act of like self-perseverance. Like you are choosing yourself by going, which is one of the things that I always make sure to highlight.
Definitely. I can see, because I thought therapy was to trauma dump. Before I used to think it's trauma dumping. I don't feel like telling everybody all the crap I go through. They don't need to know all that about me. It was kind of like a safety net to not have all your eggs in one basket, because even though your therapist is not going to do this because they have client privilege, confidentiality, it was like, I don't want nobody to have everything on me so they can use it against me. It's a defense mechanism.
No,
Definitely.
yeah, it's common. Yeah, it's definitely one. It shows up in general. Like regardless, you're still sitting across and you're making yourself vulnerable to
Yes.
someone, and especially when depending on like your own maybe family experiences. Like I said, societal, cultural. There's so many things that we learn about like vulnerability or being
Mm-hmm.
perceived like weak or someone being able to take advantage. That
Yep.
sometimes we can prevent ourselves from having access to like resources and things of that sort, which a therapist can certainly show up with. And again, it's not as if every session is that you're going in there and you're going to leave with this groundbreaking of why you did this thing at 5. Like that's not what therapy
Right.
shows up. Like sometimes you're having therapy and you're like, I had to send this email up the chain of command, and now you are over here just going off. And you may have those moments where it may not necessarily be that you're trauma dumping, but maybe it's something that you're wanting to process from yesteryears, or something that happened on 695 today. So I think that some of it is, there's no right or wrong way. There's no expectation when you're kind of like in that space, but kind of like you just highlighted, like the idea of like someone having something over you. I think it certainly, comes from like a place where like so many systems have been, oppressive to Black people, to queer people, to people. Like there's so many people that have been impacted by some of these systems that it's understandable why that mindset and mentality still shows up from time to time.
Absolutely. And I think being woman and being defined as weaker or more vulnerable of the species, and when you're the only, and there's only women, there's no male protected, somebody becomes that protector. That was me, of course. I'm the oldest. Like you said, not to trauma dump, not that you're broken, and it's not for who hurt you. It's for you to become a better version of yourself. Things are still going to happen, but now you know how to cope with it. Now you know what boundaries to set. Now you know what triggers happen, and essentially you become a stronger person, that you don't let those overcome you. You get to choose now how you
Yeah.
respond or how you feel. So
Yeah.
that is definitely my perspective now. It's not that I'm broken. It's I'm learning. I come in there so you and I can find out the best way for me to handle situations in my life, and for me to understand where I can grow. And that just because I lack in some field doesn't mean that I'm wrong, or that doesn't mean that I'm a failure. That means that I have room to grow here. Okay, now the next one is, What common threads do you see connecting the struggles of all your diverse clients?
The one commonality is that, all of my clients have found ways to like choose themselves, so to speak, in terms of like
Mm.
therapy, like a part of like their self care, a part of and of how they show up.
Mhm.
It looks different across the board. I guess some of the commonalities that maybe stand out, maybe in terms of, I do tend to see more Black clients. I tend to see queer identifying clients, a lot of like ethical non-monogamy, maybe some that
Mm.
are like sexual health aspects. So I would say commonality may be that they fall within those ranges, but in terms of like what they're looking for, it looks totally different from one client to the
Right.
next.
On the website for the agency that you work for, it
Mm.
mentions that you focus on the importance of a collaborative therapeutic relationship in your in the whole intro video that you have on their website. Can you elaborate on what that looks like in practice and like why it matters to have that collaborative therapeutic relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, like therapy was never meant to sort of just be like the end all be all.
Mm.
So the idea in terms of like collaborating, maybe like there's only a certain level in terms of like expertise that I may be able to assist in being collaborative and discussing like, hey, this is how far maybe I can show up and having like, what may be needed. I've had clients that I've worked with that we have collaborated in getting them connected with a pelvic floor specialist. There
Mm.
are some clients that have maybe felt as though like, hey, maybe like managing some of my anxiety with just like, coping skills and therapy isn't enough. So we've, collaborated and have been able to connect them with medication management.
Mm.
There have been some clients where it's maybe we're connecting them with like a urologist. Like the idea is being able to like to be collective in some of those spaces. Like I was like, we weren't meant to it all alone. So that's how it can show up kind of in some of those ways. As far as like my approach, like is collaborative, and I'm not showing up assuming to know more about you than you. Like it's not realistic. So it's collaborative, and like you're kind of leading this, and I can be here along the way, just saying like, hey, like what if we maybe also incorporate this perspective, or like, hey, like I can understand how this is showing up, or why maybe that defense is there. Like, can we also maybe look at how that defense mechanism maybe shows up in other areas? So it's collaborative in that. I am very big on like ensuring like that all of my clients know like I am not well versed in you. We walk
Mhm.
different just paths of life. We have different external stressors, but the collaborative piece is just important because therapy was not meant to solely hold everything. Like there's some things that are just like outside of our control, and I think that like just kind of puts us back into like the idea of like this one thing can take care of everything, and it's honestly not as realistic.
You would want that as a client because sometimes we also do the opposite. We feel as if you know more because you're the specialist. So you tell us what to do. And that right there kind of takes that away. You don't enable them to depend on you. You enable
Hmm.
them to see their strength, to see where they can, like what do they say? I can I can catch a fish and feed you for a day, or I could teach you to fish and you can feed yourself for your life. And you're teaching them how to do that so they can do when they're not with you. They don't, or if they can't get a session or something, you're teaching them how to do that to cope with life outside of you. So I think
Yeah.
that's really good that you have that collaborative mindset because there are a lot of people who may just say, I'm going to go to a therapist and they need to tell me what to do to fix it. That doesn't, and I myself know someone very close to my family who's like that, where it's like, just because you go to therapy for your anger or something, they're telling you what to do in the session, but you have to be able to apply it outside of it. I don't know if you're taking full advantage of your therapy or if something, or if that needs to be said, your therapist needs to say that to you directly. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to work with you on what you can do, even when we're separated, in real time. So that is a great mindset. I'm so glad you have, and I'm glad you put it out there. I'm collaborative with you. I don't know you more than you, and I'm going to help you with your strengths, if it's finding your strength or if it's getting better at something that you have, you're just not as confident in. So I love that. Thank you for that. In your expertise, how have societal stigmas around therapy evolved? And what do you think contributes to these changes?
I think a lot of it honestly is like generational aspects. Like,
Mm.
millennials, Gen Zs, like very much are like, we're not just following what Nan and I'm told us from before. So I think just
Mhm.
that in itself makes a big difference. And honestly, I think there's been so many things that just have like happened in terms of like just like the world in general that it has brought to the like to the forefront. Like there are so many examples of why like therapy is needed and beneficial. There was so much isolation just in general that I think COVID really brought some of those things forward. I mean, again, there's like I said, there's so many things that can certainly kind of fall within that Black Lives Matter movement. Like there's a lot that really kind of brought things to the forefront of why therapy is needed. Exposure to resources, licensed therapists that are Black only represent like 4%. So I think a lot of the different changes and things of that sort really brought like an awareness that maybe in past generations wasn't there, because again, they're operating off of, they're doing the best they can with what they can, but they're using maybe what Nana has passed down, and Nana's using what her mom passed down, and it kind of just creates more and more of that difference. But I think now that, therapy is being normalized, I also work part-time at a college, and one of the things that they have incorporated within their tuition is access to counseling and therapy. So I think that a lot of it is just more exposure. It's becoming more normalized, and I think you also have like generations that now are also kind of using their voices and their platforms to really kind of promote and bring more awareness to it outside of just like something being wrong.
Absolutely. And I think the vulnerability that people are having on social media now, and you don't know that you have a community, and then social media comes out. Do I like the algorithm? No. Right? Do I like being fed what they think I want to see? No, but that's what I search too, right? So me searching, and then I found other moms on Instagram who were going through that, and they gave tips, or I realized I wasn't alone. And then you find yourself on these different sides of like TikTok and this therapy talk, whatever the hashtag is, and then you're like, I'm not alone. Therapy is okay. And I think that, like you said, during COVID, everybody was on social media, everybody was posting, everybody was being open about how they feel. While social media does have its negativities, in that when it comes to your mental awareness, when it comes to your well-being in general, people found that community because it was just like, I'm not on the island anymore. I'm not broken. I'm not messed up. This is something that others go through too. And they're giving me advice, and they said that they went to therapy, and they're showing all the different things and how it helped. And COVID did spring that forward a lot, which beneficial for all the licensed therapists out there for sure. Because you don't have to convince someone. Like you said, Nana didn't try it. Nana had an outcome. You're gonna get the same outcome if you don't try something different. So this is a strategic question here. What are some effective strategies you recommend for clients who struggle with their self-care, especially when they perceive it as something unattainable, especially women? We really cut ourselves short when it comes to self-care because we wear so many hats and we do so many things.
I think one of the biggest things is like when we think of self-care, it doesn't mean that you went to a spa and you've put cucumbers on your eyelids. That may be self-care for some, but that is not just like a universal across the board. I think some of it is being able to recognize like the different ways that self-care can show up. Like, you know what? I got up 10 minutes early and I was able to make a cup of coffee and some oatmeal. Even something as, simplistic, so to speak, as that is a form of self-care. But being able to really kind of find like what works. Like one of the things I always say is like, if there was a place or an activity or a range of people that you could find yourself kind of comfortable, so to speak, to be around, that like you don't have to be as on. It takes as little effort to kind of show up in some of those spaces. And again, it looks different. Like some people may feel as though like active rest is how they're able to have self-care. Like, you know what? I was able to straighten up my office and I was able to kind of move about and get errands done. Maybe that active rest is your form of self-care. Maybe being able to create a place where I can just step away and not have to engage with people. So, maybe I did go on the spot. Maybe I did kind of go on a solo hike. So it's really, I would say more than anything, finding what works. There's no one stop shop in terms of your self-care, and knowing that your self-care may look different. Maybe today you needed to totally be by yourself, but maybe your next time that like you're checking in with your self-care, it's people, it's community that you're wanting and needing, that maybe you don't feel as hyper vigilant around as if you were in some of these other spaces. So more than anything, I would say being open to recognizing that there are differences, and being intentional with prioritizing it, right? Because, you can't show up in relationships, you can't show up in friendships, you can't really show up yourself if those needs aren't considered or taken into part of your day-to-day as well.
Yeah, definitely learned that the hard way. We've touched on before in the past too, just like I said, in relationships or even as a mom, you kind of get lost in the titles too. And I got lost in my titles and never took care of myself. And while I was there, I wasn't pleasant to be around.
Mm-hmm.
There was no care. I wasn't taking care of myself. So I was there as a duty in that title. I wasn't there as myself, just being present in the moment. It took me a long time to realize, like you said, that self-care comes in different facets. And in my head, it wasn't attainable because I wasn't being able to do what the self-care, go get your hair done, go prep yourself, or even like my husband, he was able to go out on the weekends and go to a basketball league and play. And I'm like, I don't have anything. I don't have any community. I don't have any. I'm just here. If I'm not here, then I'm out of the grocery store. I can't find an outlet, a release. And that took a toll on the relationship as well. But then as which a lot of things have happened in my 30s, which I love. I feel like your 20s are for figuring things out, making mistakes. I just happened to have a kid during that time. It was a great time. But in my 30s, I realized that, and I said it to my husband, as long as I don't have to think, I feel like that's my self-care. I don't got to think. I have to think for everybody. Like we touched on before, my family, myself, my kids, my husband. Like, it goes up in family generations, right? I'm the person. And I was like, I just don't want to have to think. I don't want to have to plan. I don't want to have to strategize. I just want to be able to turn my brain off.
Yeah.
And that to me, for I think it was all of 2023 and half of 2024. I was like, that's all I want to do is just turn off my brain. I don't want to think. I don't want to make a decision. And that was my self-care. I felt so much better. I felt so much lighter. I was just like, I don't have to worry about it. Somebody else can think about it. In the same breath, I had to realize that if I'm not going to worry about it or think about it, and I'm going to delegate it, I can't have a standard on how something is done. Because then you stress yourself out again and you start thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it and then you take away from your self-care. Like, I don't even put the radio on in the car. It's just quiet. I don't have to think. My imagination, I can go off, and those are my two main things of self-care. It's just quiet, and I can be creative with my business, or I can just not think and I can binge Netflix and get involved into, whatever TV show I'm watching. Like you said, there's productivity that happens too. I can just clean up my dresser. It's mine. I can clean out
Yeah.
my closet. It's just the freedom to do it whenever I want. That is my self-care. Yeah, it took a while for me, myself, to learn that it is attainable and it comes in different forms. And being able to take the break when I want is the ultimate self-care for me. Let's see here. Can you discuss the importance of transparency and authenticity in therapy and how they contribute to the healing process?
Transparency shows up kind of for both
Mhm.
client and the therapist. Like I said earlier, I know what my expertise are, and I know where I now need to like outsource. I think being able to recognize that and being transparent with clients about that, but really just also recognize when clients come to sessions, kind of thinking like you said earlier, I don't want to tell someone too much. You don't have to go to therapy. Let me tell every single detail. Sometimes it's like where you are and where you feel comfortable just within that. All of my clients know. I always say level of realism. We still get some things done, but I'm not, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that, right? Like maybe it is sometimes challenging, right? So that transparency in terms of there may be moments that like I challenge you. And it's not from, pushing or a place to cause harm, but just to be able to allow some of those different perspectives so that, as you said, kind of on their journey of healing, you're able to at least have like an alternative kind of like thought to take into consideration in whatever choice you decide to make. And so I'm very transparent about that up front. There may be moments where I'm challenging you. There may be moments where, we like, hold on, wait, let's roll back here. Let's check in about this particular kind of thing. But I really think that the biggest thing is really recognizing limitations. That is so important, which is why, like I said, being able to kind of network and create to be, hey, this may be what it seems as though the direction that we're going in, and maybe this is how far I can get us there. But again, you're connecting with like a pelvic floor specialist. That is not something that I am capable of helping you with in any way. Like that is not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is at least I can have a referral, right? Which is why I think the transparency in that is important. And as well as networking, right? As therapists, we can get away from the transparency and being able to network with each other. I've received referrals from other clinicians and other practices. So being able to have like, that level of transparency of, hey, here's someone who I actually maybe have had a conversation with versus maybe I only clicked around on a website, so to speak. So it definitely can show up differently. But I'm very big on knowing like we'll challenge some things together, and we'll take it at a pace that works, and we'll slow it down as needed.
Just a bonus question to that, because you are on both sides of it. Are you aware if you are not being fully transparent or authentic, or do you set a certain boundary whenever you're now the client? Because you said you have a therapist yourself. So when you go in, do you kind of have a defense or something of that nature where it's just like, I know this part, or do you keep yourself open-minded to it as well?
Yeah. I mean, definitely keeping yourself open minded for sure. I think that if not, it kind of feeds into, again, that idea I have to go in and tell this person everything. I have to do these things. And then it starts to put like almost like a strain in terms of what you're supposed to do in therapy. Sometimes, hey, maybe you know what? I myself am still processing it. So I'm not at a place where I can express it to my therapist. And clients have that as well. Like, hey, you know what? I've been thinking on this, and maybe now I'm at a place that I'm ready to kind of talk about it. So, when we're talking about transparency, I think that we have to get away from the idea that, again, either like a all or nothing. Either I'm going to therapy and I'm telling them everything, or I'm not telling anything at all. You have to consider the person. Like maybe you're not at a place where you can process the outcome of it. So I think some of it is being able to recognize, like, hey, for self, I would say in my own therapy, like, how comfortable do I feel that, like, once I do open maybe this side of things, that I'll have the supports needed, I'll have the awareness there. So I think when we think of transparency is less of like, hey, are you telling everything, versus like, acknowledging that, we're human and we have moments that we still are working, so to speak, and it's fine. I think more than anything, like recognizing like it's okay. There's no right, wrong way to do therapy, so to speak. I mean, but nonetheless, like you don't have to kind of go in and feel like, oh, I have to bear it all, so to speak.
That is a complete sentence. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I love it. All right. So I have a final question for you.
Okay.
And I want this from both perspectives, right? One from the therapist side, one from the client side. So you can decide which one you want to answer first, or which way you want to answer first. But it's what advice would you give someone who's considering therapy for the first time but feels overwhelmed by the idea of opening up about their struggles?
More than anything, like recognizing, is this person like a fit to support me in the ways that I'm looking for? We can all look around on anyone's website, but do they offer consults so that I can say like, hey, these are the specific things that maybe I'm looking for, and are you capable of supporting in those? How many people with similar issues have you been able to kind of support? So I think that some of it is being able to recognize like what it is that you're maybe looking for in some of those instances. Certainly being open-minded. You're not going to go to therapy and undo 30, 40 plus years of anything and think that you're going to go into a session and it's going to like suddenly shift. So some of it in terms of being open-minded is that awareness in itself. Like, you won't have one session and be, I'm now suddenly so enlightened. Maybe you're a couple sessions in, but also know at any point you have an autonomy that's there, in the sense of like, if I feel as though this is a fit, I'm able to kind of, pivot as needed. I definitely encourage doing consults, being able to actually speak with someone on the phone. Are they able to support the maybe stressors or supports that you're looking for? Are they well versed just within those? Do they align in terms of there are a lot of like oppressive systems? Is this a safe space for me to be able to discuss that? Is certainly of importance. But more than anything, knowing that sometimes you're kind of going into therapy and you're just like, I don't know what's gonna come up. We'll see what comes up as we're going through it, and that's okay as well.
To kind of piggyback off of that, because I feel like when you gave that one, it was you being the client looking at things from the perspective of the therapist. For people that are feeling overwhelmed, would you say that comes into place for you to know, like, is it only online? Is it in person? Like, what would the therapist perspective of helping people consider therapy make sure your therapist is providing this, or make sure that the questions that you as a therapist would want to be asked, or that you would want people to know, so that they don't go in blind, and letting them know that it's okay if it doesn't work out with the first, second, third therapist, so from that perspective too, how would you help the person being overwhelmed and considering therapy?
I think one of the biggest things is that you're making the choice to go, which is half the battle in itself. Really, just highlighting that, because I think even that step can seem, I guess, kind of small, that it can be overlooked. So I think just acknowledging just that in itself. Certainly as a therapist, if you're looking into telehealth versus not, I offer like hybrid. I have some clients where I offer evenings. If you have a therapist and they're only available 9 to 5 and you yourself work a 9 to 5, how will that align? How will you be able to incorporate that need for self? I definitely encourage that with any of my clients that I see telehealth with. Are you at a place where you'll be able to kind of allow yourself to be present, allow yourself to kind of hold this container for yourself? My hearing's not what it used to be, so like if we got to whisper during the session, is this most ideal? Being able those things to really consider, I think is important. But I think also you, the therapist, being able to recognize like, hey, what this person is bringing forward. Again, am I able to be of support? One of the things I ask all of my clients or potential clients, especially during like phone consults, is, the same way that they're using that consult to see if I'm a fit for them, I'm also doing the same to ensure that I'm able to show up and be of support in the ways in which they're looking for. What is it that you are looking to get out of attending therapy at this point in time? One of the things I often get is like, oh, I was looking for like a Black therapist. And I'm like, I love that. Like, and what else, right? Where else can I show up of support just within that? Because again, some people are like, oh, I want to be able to you to tell me this, that, or the third. Well, I might not necessarily be the ideal in that, but here are referrals. Even in terms of like couples, I'm wanting you to decide if we should stay together or not. Well, that's not a decision I would make, but here are some things that we could work through and consider that decision that works for both of you that you have decided. So I think also being able to know what the client's expectations are important as well.
As someone who is not yet in therapy, but would like to look at it, I need to, if I'm going to show up and be vulnerable, for lack of a better word, not in a negative sense, but vulnerable to be open, can my therapist reciprocate that? That'll probably be the first thing that lets you know right there if you should continue if you can even do a consultation, like that person's vibe, how they see themselves fitting into your space, not you fitting into theirs. I wouldn't have thought about that if we weren't having this conversation, right? I would just say like, they're the therapist, they'll know if they're a good fit for me, not knowing that they need to, them actually saying it and expressing it, doing the action of showing that vulnerability back is one of the major considerations into whether you should move forward with them. So that is all my questions, Brittany. Thank you so much as a woman to woman, as friend to friend, and as a normal human to a therapist. I thank you for your input. I learned a lot more this session than we have had on our personal phone calls. So that is good to know. What I want you to do is just tell the audience all the places they can find you. I will make sure to link everything down below in case anyone who is in the Maryland or Florida area for telehealth can reach you. So go ahead and let them know where you're all at.
Our website is always a great place for sure, which is Space Between Counseling Services. On our website, you're able to take a look at services. You're able to take a look at availability. You're also able to schedule a complimentary phone consult to see if we would be a collective fit. I am also on social media. I am on Facebook, which is just Brittany Spencer. I am on Instagram, which is Brittany_Spencer_. Hopefully Malaysia will check that out for me to be sure. On TikTok as well. TikTok is Therapy with Brittany. So like those are the places to find. Our website is definitely a great resource in terms of, we even have some questions of like what to consider when doing a consult. We have a variety of blogs. We have a lot of resources that could definitely be helpful. So I definitely would recommend taking a look at our website. It is a great website. I might be biased, but it's a great website. It is very informative, so it can definitely be beneficial in that.
And do you have any closing remarks for women in general for Women's History Month and us, reaching out to them, letting them know that therapy is one of the beneficial factors in them gaining clarity? Any closing words for women in general?
Therapy is absolutely beneficial and definitely a way to go, but also just recognize what community just look for you in general right now. There are just so many ongoing changes. There are so many things happening in the day to day. What is your identified community? Rather that's family, friends, organizations, places that you can really have a place that you're able to show up and really be at ease, and giving yourself grace. There's no blueprint necessarily like how to just show up as a functioning human. So, giving yourself grace during those moments, acknowledging wins. They're, rather large or small, but being able to really like acknowledge and give yourself like that validation is important. And just continue showing up each day. You are doing it, whether it is validated by someone else or not. And just, continuing to choose self.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Brittany, for your time and all your input. It's very helpful. And like I said, everyone, I will leave in the description of the podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be down there in the description. All the links to find Brittany, to contact her. Make sure you follow her on social media. She does do TikToks that are informative, that are funny, that show her personality, a lot more outside of the podcast that we have today. So thanks again, Brittany, for your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.